Welcome, everyone, to RB1 Colon, a fantasy football podcast, part of the Fake Team Podcast Network or channel, either one. I am your humble host, the consummate professional and best friends with the Oracle, Pete Rogers, and I am joined by only one of the guys. It is El Saboteur, ring bearer Aaron Rodgers and Danica Patrick's wedding, and the working girl, Jordan Smith. Jordan, how you doing today?
Oh, doing excellent.
Doing simply fantastic. I don't know, in the 3 years of this podcast, this feels like the first time that's ever just been the two of us.
I know. I'm a little nervous. Honestly, I don't know what to do.
I know. It's very different when you're the only person who can respond to me. You have to be constantly ready for whatever weird tangents I go on.
Quick question. I see some lights in that doorway. Not to, peek around your entire house, but I see some lights in that doorway. Are those Christmas decorations already?
They are. So we set them up for our Halloween party to add a little bit of lighting. And then we decided to keep them because we like them. But Becca and I have been having this internal struggle for a while now because she is a very big fan of the Christmas holiday and basically jumping straight to Christmas decorations and celebrating, where I feel like Thanksgiving needs to have its rightful time on the throne. She claims that there's no good Thanksgiving music and there's no really good Thanksgiving decorations. And that is why that it should be completely ignored and rejected. Whereas I say, give me a hand painted turkey and some pumpkins, I guess is a double usage for Thanksgiving. I don't know. The music she's kind of got me on. Pumpkin pie. There you go. Good pies. So we've kept them up. Becca is fully, and we got our first snowfall today. So Becca's fully vibing the Christmas spirit in the first few days of November.
See, when there's snow on the ground, then I can understand, but I'm really anti once the calendar flips to November 1. I'm like, let's get Thanksgiving a try. Let's
give it the time and respect it deserves.
Exactly. It's a top 2 food holiday.
Hell yeah.
So I'm all in on Thanksgiving and I get excited for it. But you know what? If it's snowing outside and the weather is determining the aesthetic, then maybe throw some Christmas decor up, play a little Boys to Men Christmas album.
Plus, Christmas lights, I will say, to their credit, Christmas lights are just a very good lighting mechanism to just, they add a little bit of fun and cheer to whatever environment they're thrown into. So we just have them over our doorway that then links onto our the mantle that we have all the TV and stuff, all electronics on. And that's it just adds a little nice vibe. It makes it a little kind of comfy, cozy. You can turn all the lights off, but still have some lights to illuminate the room. So even if it's not specifically the Christmas holidays or a Christmas celebration, I feel like it's okay to have Christmas lights up. I don't feel like that's necessarily locking you into Christmas decor up early.
Yeah, you just have to keep them up all year long. Keep the stockings up.
Just to make sure.
This is a Christmas household.
Which is very true on Becca's side. My side, I am a Thanksgiving household. Thanksgiving is the best holiday.
She also has a point there. There is not a Thanksgiving song that I can actually think of. If any of the listeners have a Thanksgiving song that's actually a song, not something that you sang at a Thanksgiving elementary school recital, let us know because I'm interested in this.
The closest thing I've come up to is the turkey song that Linda Belcher sings in Bob's Burgers. Is the closest Thanksgiving song that I've ever heard. Which is
I can't say I'm familiar.
Basically it's oh god, what is it? Now I'm under pressure and I can't remember. I've been singing it all week just to kind of annoy Becca and to tell her that there is a good Thanksgiving song. All I know is that it ends with "kill the turkey," which I feel like is very apt. So anyways, so we'll have a poll on Twitter to see whether or not we are majority listened to by Christmas supporters or Thanksgiving supporters. This is a dividing line amongst people. You're either one or the other.
It's a binary.
Yeah, you can't be both. You can't be both. It's a miracle that my marriage is lasting as long as it is. All right, we got actual football to get to, per usual. We got Week 10 tidbits to tack, and then we're going to talk about some players that you can give up on and maybe not keep waiting for their breakout to occur. And then obviously week 11 waiver wire ads. But to start, as we always do, because we are a fun, positive podcast and we like to reward those who had good days, week 10 fantasy MVP. Jordan, who is your winner for this week?
It kind of feels like a cop-out, but I have to give it to my man, Lamar Jackson, because he not only dominated and was the top quarterback scorer this week, but he had more passing touchdowns than he did incompletions, which is a pretty good thing to have. Perfect passer rating, 223 yards through the air, another 65 on the ground. Yes, it was against the lowly Cincinnati Bengals, but who cares? You don't care. This is a fantasy coup that you need. You need all those points. And if you played Mark Andrews, you stuck it out with him. You doubled up on the fun. So it was awesome watching him be a virtual video game character out there. It was great.
He's been, I mean, for anyone who's listened to this pod, they know, and we all know that he's basically running away with the fantasy MVP award on this show. I mean, he's been nominated most every single week that he's played in. But I think now he's starting to make serious headway in the actual NFL MVP race, because outside of Russell Wilson and Christian McCaffrey, like, who else is there? I think those are the top three: Russell Wilson, Christian McCaffrey, and Lamar Jackson, who are all battling it out. And Christian McCaffrey, he's been used at just an extreme level that eventually his body's probably going to tire it a little bit. And Russell Wilson's right now taking on the best, one of the top defenses in the NFL in the 49ers. So we'll see how he does against that. Lamar Jackson has just looked like a human cheat code this entire season. And for every worry that people had about him not being able to, like, throw the football or take that next step, like, he has just looked exceptional and looks like someone who's basically going to make all other 31 teams regret that they did not take him.
Yeah, over the course of the next few games here, he does have some pretty tough defenses to go up against, thinking of San Francisco and Buffalo in back-to-back weeks, but Buffalo may be slowing down a little bit. I wish I could definitively say from a personal standpoint that Lamar Jackson is just a straight-up league winner, like in the vein of, Priest Holmes or Sean Alexander back in the day, but I have Lamar in 3 leagues, and I actually ended up losing one of those leagues.
Jordan, that's
it's
not
still
good.
On the fence right now. But
that is a sign of poor roster construction.
He's having. Hey, you know what? I had like a. This is a nobody hears about your fantasy football team segment. Just a dud from David Johnson. Adam Thielen was out. Chris Godwin was not
doing anything
in his bag yet. So it's just, it's been one of those for that redraft league, but it is what it is. Lamar Jackson.
Oh yeah, hands down. I'm now looking at his stats too. If you took his like rushing stats and just made him a running, like if you erased all of his passing, he would probably be a top 5 fantasy running back. Like, his rushing numbers are crazy. He's had 3 games of over 110 yards. He's scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 touchdowns on the ground.
According to ESPN as well, his lowest rushing total was week 1, where he had 6 yards against Miami, but that was also his highest scoring fantasy game.
Oh, that shit makes sense. My fantasy MVP, I mean, obviously Lamar was the guy who I actively chose against Lamar to offer a different opinion. So really, Lamar is the fantasy MVP for the week. I'm going to give it to Patrick Mahomes, Patty Mahomes, you had him sitting on your bench while he was injured. He came in and against a pretty good Titans defense, basically picked up where he left off, threw for 3 touchdowns, looked all Patrick Mahomesian. He did a little jump pass that had ESPN all pooping their pants with excitement and all that jazz. So I'm going to give it to him. That the loss was not on him, because the Chiefs defense has reminded us that they can't stop the run worth a damn. And he has returned to all of those lineups who needed him and performed admirably.
Yeah, you know what? He was on the other team in that league that I lost to, in which I saw Lamar Jackson. So, you know what? That's
one MVP losing to another MVP. You accept that. You understand
solid
that.
On that. Yeah, I'm willing to accept that one.
So there you go. Those are our MVPs for Week 10. Let's get on to Week 10 tidbits. And And we'll start off looking at Cleveland's backfield because it was the first game that we saw Kareem Hunt back in action, and he had, if you look at how the kind of carries and touches panned out, he had exactly half the touches Chubb did. Chubb finished with 22 touches. Kareem Hunt finished with 11. This worked against the Bills defense that has been struggling to stop the run for a better part of this season. But what I'm worried about, Jordan, and as a Chubb owner, you have to talk me off this cliff. I'm worried about this if they're going to truly split carries or split touches for the rest of the season. If it's a low touch game, I don't want Hunt to be kind of coming in and taking half of Chubb's touches and carries, especially in an offense that I really don't trust to do the right thing, because Freddie Kitchens is yet to show me that they can do the right thing in making this offense go and offense run. Tell me that I don't have to worry, Jordan, as a Chubb owner. Tell me that Kareem Hunt, this was just a blip on the radar or just a fluke occurrence, and that really it's still Chubb's backfield and we don't have to worry about Hunt cutting into too much of Chubb's workload.
You know what? If you're looking for me to be that person to kind of ease your concerns, it's not going to be, and it's not for any.
This is why we never have it just the two of us on the podcast, Jordan. You don't support me when I need to be supported.
It's mostly because Nick Chubb was not being used, or is still not being used enough, even when Kareem Hunt wasn't involved. Like this whole, who was it, Dontrell Hilliard at
randomly getting touches, and God damn it,
definitively saying, yeah, he is our third down running back, telegraphing to the other team. We talked about this on a different pod. I cannot in good faith say that Nick Chubb will still be as effective as he was earlier this season, because they brought in Kareem Hunt. They think he can be a weapon, and personal stuff aside with what happened with him, he was one of the best running backs in the game when he was in Kansas City. So feel like if he still has a little bit of that left, they actually would be a little bit foolish not to use him. They should use him at least over Dontrell Hilliard. But I can see Cleveland thinking that they just need to do a 3-man running back crew when they don't have the offense for it, which is just like a very soup kitchens thing to do right now.
It's so ridiculous to be like, hey, we're going to be this 3-headed rushing attack when we have Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham as our wide receivers. It's this whole offense. I mean, this whole offense is just, part of me wants to sell my Chubb shares just so that I don't have to deal with this offense. But he's been so good this year, and he's been so reliable for the most part. And I just have a hard time, parting with that, just given how good he's been. I mean, if he's been let's quickly bring up some. He's been the RB6 in both standard and PPR, and so you're loving that production. And you will have some games like they play Miami still. They play Cincinnati. They play Cincinnati twice actually. Like those are games where you could see what we saw with the Bills, where there's enough of a workload for Chubb to still get his and Kareem Hunt to get his as well. But there are some matchups. I mean, Pittsburgh's defense has been playing lights out recently, and Baltimore's defense has been playing really good. And those are games towards the end of the season where, if you're relying on Nick Chubb to give you solid performances in the fantasy playoffs, and then there's a game where he kind of gets road stopped, what am I trying? Blocked? We'll go with railroaded. I had the second part, but not the first part. He gets railroaded, and suddenly Kareem Hunt comes in and gets a lot of touch. Like, I don't know. I don't like the fact that he's being introduced with at like a serious load from the get-go. That worries me. And so I'll be interested to see how week 11 plays out against the Steelers, because if you again see that 50-50 split or the whatever 25-75, that's going to worry me for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's kind of schedule makers. Hello, they have Pittsburgh twice in 3 weeks. I don't trust this coaching staff to be able, like, if they lay a clunker next week against Pittsburgh, I don't trust them to be able to turn around in 2 weeks and be able to fix certain things that went wrong. So if Pittsburgh is a dud for that offense, I can anticipate it being a dud the second time around, because that time it will be in Pittsburgh itself. One thing that might be a little bit of a silver lining is that Cleveland can get a little bit cold, can get a lot of snow. So maybe some weather will keep it to a ground and pound game, especially in some of these brutal AFC North matchups. But speaking of like the Browns offense, did you see how many targets that Odell Beckham Jr. had
It's asinine. Tell me how many he
compared to
had.
catches?
Tell me.
He had 5 catches,
Oh my God.
which, 5
Sure.
catches. Sure, we like that. 12 targets.
Odell!
They were literally like somebody playing Madden trying to boost up their wide receiver stats at the end of a game.
No.
They just could not like organically get him a good enough targets, because 12 targets, you're like, hell yeah, that's exactly what you want in the offense. But it's not a schemed 12 targets. It's like, hey, we have Odell Beckham Jr., just throw the ball at him. And that's not how it works against NFL football teams.
No. I hope that Odell is willing to stay patient for one more year, get Freddie Soup Kitchens out of there, put an actual promote Todd Monken, who had a fantastic offense in Tampa Bay last year with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Remember that when Ryan Fitzpatrick was lighting up the league? Like, why not just bring that offense here to Cleveland and then start scheming Odell to get open and get the ball regularly? And because I think there's potential. I think Baker Mayfield is a good quarterback with Jarvis Landry. That's a great pairing. It's a 1-2 punch at wide receiver. And obviously Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in that backfield is fantastic. It's just the play calling has been absolutely atrocious. Oh my God. Don't even get us started again.
Someone, I'm not sure if it was a Browns beats writer or something like that, but they retweeted an article from earlier in the season, might have been in the off season, with like comments from Bob Wiley, their Hard Knocks favorite, who had the big old gut, great mustache. They were talking about how some of the comments in there in hindsight were maybe a little bit more accurate than we gave them credit for at the time. Kind of were written off at the time as like just a assistant coach who got fired, and was just a little bit salty about that. But the things that he said about, who was actually I forget who it was specifically, who was making like the real turnaround for the offense. And he basically said, though, it wasn't Freddie Kitchens doing, which
we're seeing that.
Admittedly, we all thought it was. I remember being on the pod last season, and once Freddie Kitchens took over, we were like, "Oh yeah, Freddie Kitchens!
Let's do this.
Let's go!" We were really excited, but
time to cook.
Maybe not so much.
Yeah, maybe not. One offense that has not been letting us down in recent weeks has been the Cardinals offense, who went into Tampa Bay and absolutely lit it up. Murray had 324 yards and 3 touchdowns, which all of them went to Christian Kirk, who had a monster breakout game and was in all of my DFS lineup. So pat on my back. But you also had Larry Fitzgerald, had 71 yards on 8 catches, and Andy Isabella has now had 2 games back-to-back where he's been a factor with 78 yards on 3 catches. Is this passing game here to stay, Jordan? Are you starting to buy into the Cardinals passing attack as like, okay, these are now consistent, viable fantasy producers that I should be either having on my roster or consistently starting in the eyes of like Christian Kirk or Larry Fitzgerald, who are likely not available on your waivers?
Oh, absolutely. Right now, Andy Isabella might be a little bit of a boomer bust guy, but I think as they see his big playability, because he can literally just turn a 10-yard pass into 80 very quickly. Did you see that catch, Larry Fitzgerald, where he like tipped it back to himself on the sideline?
A filthy grab.
Larry Fitzgerald, the ageless wonder, podcast favorite.
It's incredible.
But it's easy when we're talking about rookies to be like, oh, Josh Jacobs, like watch what he's doing in Oakland in recent weeks, or Nick Bosa, who has just been a terror to opposing offensive lines. It's kind of easy to miss Kyler Murray in Arizona. Arizona, not really like a large fan base. Nobody expected them to be like this good, let alone kind of in it in the division. Like, because the Chiefs fell to 6-4, the Raiders are at 5-4. Like, the Arizona Cardinals are kind of. Oh wait, no, that's not.
No, that's the AFC West.
I'm mixing up. If the Niners weren't like undefeated right now or 8-1 or whatever the heck they are, then we would probably be talking about the Cardinals a little bit more. Pretty impressive stuff. I like the Cardinals passing game, and who knew Cliff Kingsbury probably okay.
Good at his job. Who'd have thunk? Who'd have thunk that a team did their research and got him into, hired the right person? Yeah, no, I am fully back on board with the Cardinals offense. There was certainly lulls, and it's taken a little bit of time for Kyler Murray to kind of blossom into this offense to really kind of take form and take shape. And he's had some bad games. He's had, 2 single-digit games back in week 7 and week 8. But then followed that up with a 27-pointer against San Francisco, which was all, everyone was surprised by that on Thursday night. And then again, a 30-pointer against Tampa Bay. And they got San Francisco again. Talk about your 2 games against the same team in 3 weeks. Schedule makers, what you doing? But I like this Arizona Cardinals offense. And I think if you can buy into this receiving, I think Andy Isabella is a guy who we might see have a little bit more of a role as we go forward because he's just become more and more a part of that offense. And then obviously Christian Kirk has been a monster. And if you have him, pat on your back because he it's been a while since he scored a touchdown, but those floodgates broke for you very nicely this week.
Yeah, Kyler Murray, he is a player that next year, because when you watch Kyler Murray, he kind of does some similar things to Lamar Jackson. I don't think he's quite as fast or agile, but he is quick. And he does do a good job of making people miss in the open field. So if, he gets a tighter grasp on the offense or just playing in the NFL writ large, that can go a long way between year 1 and year 2 for NFL quarterbacks. We could start to see a little bit more of plays designed for him to take off or to move around, which would be fantasy gold next season. So
that would be saucy.
Be very aware of that.
Also, OJ Howard caught a touchdown. So thanks, OJ.
The juice is loose.
Also in tidbits, LaShawn McCoy, this Chiefs backfield has yet again another shakeup. LaShawn McCoy was a surprise health scratch right before the Chiefs-Titans game. Maybe they could have used him and won that game. But it led to Damian Williams having 14 touches for 109 total yards. Andy Reid said it was, quote, maintenance since, quote, McCoy is not getting any younger. Shots across the bow on that one. But now it's been two big games in a row for Williams, and we've been having a lot of questions about this Chiefs backfield for basically the entire season as to what name you can reliably trust in fantasy. And it seems like the pendulum has swung back around to Damian Williams because of the fact that he's been producing with the carries that he's gotten in recent weeks. And just because it seems like LaShawn McCoy might be fading towards the end of this season.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Chiefs offense and we get into players you should drop. But I think it's pretty goofy that Andy Reid wants to talk about benching players for maintenance reasons when he probably should have given Patrick Mahomes a week off against the Broncos when he got really injured. I still can't believe they kind of lost that game though. Like 50 passing attempts by Mahomes and you lose to the Tennessee Titans. What are the Tennessee Titans?
No one fucking knows.
Know.
The Tennessee Titans, you never know. It's just like Tennessee Titans are perfectly embodied. Derrick Henry is the perfect player for the Tennessee Titans because you never know what this team is going to be, and you never know what Derrick Henry is going to be.
They switch to Ryan Tannehill from Marcus Mariota, and now they're just like, oh yeah, we're in the AFC South now.
We're like a good football team. Who'd have thunk? Which I guess is like a real damnation on Marcus Mariota.
Well,
I still have faith. Get him on an offense that actually knows what they're doing with him. That's all I say. Get him to the Bears. God damn it, I want him on the Bears so badly.
I don't think that we already talked about this. Yeah, I still don't think the Bears would be able to use him right. But anyway.
Oh, who knows? All right, some quick injury news. Saquon Barkley was banged up, according to Pat Shurmur, but they've been pretty hush-hush about it, so I can't report as to whether or not it's serious. But something to monitor throughout the week because obviously it's Saquon Barkley. Dude's pretty tough, so I guess unless it's like a shattered leg, he'll probably still play. But Big news injury-wise for the Falcons as Devonta Freeman left the Saints game with a foot injury, which ushered in the Brian Hill age, where he rushed for 61 yards on 21 carries and had a receiving touchdown against a tough run defense. And he's available on waivers. And my dear friends, his next game is against the Carolina Panthers, which Jordan can attest to. You can run the football on them. Can you not, Jordan?
You can run it a little bit on the Carolina Panthers. I'm looking at their schedule too. And it's hilarious that the Atlanta Falcons got their first divisional. Wait, that was their first divisional game? Yes, it was.
Yeah,
it was their first divisional game of the season. And you kind of just feel like the Falcons are not going to lay down against divisional opponents. So they play 4 straight divisional games over the next month. And then, you will probably not be playing in week 17, but in case you are, they play another divisional game against Tampa in that time frame.
Who makes these schedules? Come on, people. It's fun, but that is ridiculous. That's basically, if the Falcons were actually in the season, then it's just basically it's just 4 games back to back. You lose any of them, you're screwed.
If they were good, and Carolina was, just a pace better, and New Orleans was firing on all cylinders, that would be the funnest division to watch.
That because
Tampa Bay, I'm a Tampa Bay fan apparently. That they would just throw a monkey wrench into the divisional standings too and just rock shit up. But man, Atlanta laying a dud this season is a big bummer.
It is a big bummer. I'm going to be curious to see where the direction of that team goes because this is and I will reference Mark Sessler of the Around the NFL podcast, because I feel like this is a good sentiment that everyone's always like, fire the coach, get a new head coach. And it's like, who realistically out there is going to be better than Dan Quinn? I think Dan Quinn obviously has his flaws and all of that jazz. You should have never let Kyle Shanahan get out the door. That's really where you made your mistake. But who likely available? What coaching prospect likely available is going to be better than Dan Quinn that you're going to be able to get your hands on? I don't know. Maybe Chip Kelly comes back. Let's bring Chip Kelly back.
Yeah, the problem with Dan Quinn is that he's a defensive-minded coach, and he's never had a good Atlanta defense. But it's almost I can attest to this as a Packers fan, the whole Mike McCarthy conundrum, where it's yeah, we should fire Mark McCarthy, replace him with somebody else. But then you're but what if that other person is worse somehow?
Right.
And Dan Quinn has had some playoff runs. He's had some appearances.
He made it to the Super Bowl.
Exactly. He's been making it difficult for me as a Packers fan in the playoffs for a couple seasons.
Yeah.
And it's hard. You have to look at it from both angles there.
Yeah. Also, Falcons, Austin Hooper had a knee injury. He's getting an MRI. And I think I just saw a notification before we jumped onto the pod that is a sprained MCL. So we'll see how long that'll keep him out of play and off the field. Luke Stalker is their backup tight end in case you guys want to go stream him. But really, you should be streaming Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Kyle Rudolph, who had 2 touchdowns against the Cowboys. It's Christmas season, which means Kyle Rudolph suddenly emerges to score touchdowns for your fantasy team.
Yeah, it's tough because Austin Hooper has been sneakily the tight end 1 this season. So if you lost him, my condolences.
You're hard to recover entirely from that. Anywho's, well, there you go. Those were week 10 of tidbits. And before we go on to players who you should give up on / they're not going to be breaking out, so don't count on it. Let's take a quick ad break. All right, we are back. Initially, I proposed this to Jordan. I was like, hey, why don't we talk players that you can cut safely, because it's end of the year or it's getting to the fantasy playoffs. And during that time, you want to make sure you can get the right players on your team and you want to make waiver wire moves, but it's always tough. If you're going to add a player, you got to remove a player. So it's good to know what players you can comfortably get rid of. And Jordan was like, nah, let's spice it up. These are players. Just stop waiting for that breakout. It's not coming. Move on from them. Forget about it. They're players you're maybe holding on to, hoping they'll eventually do something for your fantasy team, but we are here to tell you that simply is no longer the case. So, Jordan, why don't you start us off with a player that you can comfortably drop from your team, because guess what? All those expectations you had for them, they're not coming true.
Yeah, I will add too that the genesis for my thinking here was from like an earlier pod that we did this season about players that we're just too attached to, players that we just can't quit. We are here to give you a little bit of a fantasy nicotine patch. It's time to quit these players early and not let them sit on the bottom of your bench waiting for like a Tajay Sharp to start getting the points that he so deserves. Not Tajay Sharp, Taywan Taylor. That's the one.
Taylor. There you go. I was gonna be like, "Whoo, Tajay Sharp, man! If you are holding on to Tajay Sharp, we are not the podcast to help you."
No, Nick knows what I'm talking about here. So this one may not necessarily be a straight out cut, but if you haven't passed the trade deadline already, you need to go and find the Eagles fan in your fantasy league because there probably is one, and dump Alshon Jeffrey on him. He even as he's been playing, he just hasn't seemed very healthy all season. The chemistry with him and Carson Wentz just feels a little bit wonky. His catch percentage this season is 61.8% on 55 targets. So he's getting about 6 per game. Um, but they're just not falling. Like he's just not connecting. He's not doing anything with those targets. Um, Philly ranks 20th in offensive DVOA through 9 games, and they have the 27th most difficult schedule remaining for fantasy wide receivers,
Yikes.
including a matchup where Jeffrey could very well lay a goose egg against the New England Patriots this coming week. So, Alshon Jeffrey, this could be a good time to sell on him and hopefully get a new flex player or somebody else to help you make a playoff run.
Yeah, he's a perfect name for this list because I'm looking at his stats. I mean, he hasn't the most yards he's put up this season is 76. Like that's it. And he's never had multiple touchdowns in a game. He had 17 standard points back in week 1, and that's been the highlight of his season. And he's just, you said it. It's not only that he's out of sync, it looks like, with Carson Wentz. He just looks old. Like he looks like he's lost a step. He no longer looks like he can really stretch the field. Not that he was a speed guy, but that he was like a contested catch back shoulder guy down the field. And that just hasn't been there this year. And I think there was a huge loss that Deshaun Jackson's been out for that offense. But Alshon Jeffrey really hasn't emerged as really anything since his time with the Bears, unfortunately. So I think he's a great name where he's been sitting on your team because you're like, God, if I got rid of him and he suddenly pieced it together, that would be terrible. But he is a name that, if you can trade him, trade him. If not, I would honestly think about dropping him just straight up.
Yeah, he might be just one of those players where injuries have just taken the toll. It's not like didn't he have an ACL tear at one point? But he also he also just seems to consistently have a
banged
nagging injury, and he might be playing through that sort of thing right now, but that's not something that you want this home stretch.
No. If you do still have the ability to trade in your fantasy leagues, the first guy I'm going to talk about is a guy you 100% should trade because dropping him is maybe a bit extreme. But Todd Gurley, for those who drafted him thinking you were buying low on him and he'd be the same MVP, workhorse back we saw last year, or at the very least, maybe a step below that, better than what most people expected, it's time to sell on that notion. He hasn't gone over 100 total yards since week 1 this year, which is something he did 9 times last year in 14 games. And we all knew this offseason that it was going to be a reduced role for Todd Gurley and that the offense was worried about him. But he's just become an absolute non-factor in the passing game and has the 6th hardest schedule rest of the season for running backs. This is what absolutely blows my mind and also has completely made me go cold on Todd Gurley and any hope that Todd Gurley suddenly becomes a viable part of your fantasy team and suddenly puts up fantasy production for you. He didn't touch the ball in the 4th quarter against the Steelers. The Rams were needing to get that offense going to beat the Steelers. It wasn't like a blowout. They were down by less. A touchdown would have won them the game. And Todd Gurley didn't see the football. And then he was it asked that question after the game, and he was like, yeah, I expect that. I've come to expect it, or something around those lines. It's like Todd Gurley is checked out. He is not a part of this offense. He is not going to suddenly magically become a part of this offense. If I own him, if he was on my team, I would have traded him yesterday. He needs to be off your fantasy roster because he's just not going to do anything this year.
Yeah, I think the Rams. I feel like the only thing that could really bounce him back into relevance is if the Rams just do a 180 here and they're like, okay, we are struggling. We're on the brink of just not even getting a wild card spot. We need to just go back to what made us good last year, or like getting the ball in the hands of the people who were like, I don't think Cooper Kupp had a catch yet
He didn't have a catch, which
yesterday,
was crazy.
which is
My fantasy team did not like
insane.
that.
Um, the idea that Todd Gurley, especially in a game that was relatively close the entire way through, I mean, the final score was 12-17. He was still pretty efficient on the ground, 12 carries for 73 yards, and he could have easily cleared 100 if you made it a point of emphasis in the fourth to get him the ball, at least 100
Just do
all-purpose yards.
something. Yeah.
But it's got to be maddening if you're a Todd Gurley owner and you get 3 quarters of really good football and you're like, just like a nice carry, find the end zone that'll put this day like just in great territory for me. But no, the offense is just sputtering, and Jared Goff looks like, I don't know,
He looks like he
slightly
is
better than his
regressed.
backup Blake Bortles.
Oh God, that's tough. That is tough to say. Yeah, and again, like I said, the schedule doesn't get better for him. It's not like he suddenly walks into a cakewalk. He's got it's the sixth hardest. He's got to play the Ravens, the Seahawks, the 49ers, and let me check where the Cardinals are. The Cardinals are league average-ish. Like there's a bunch of league average guys too. The Bears and the Cowboys have become favorable matchup for running backs, and he plays both of those guys still. So, but I don't want to continuously try to have him in my be debating every week. It's like, do I start him? Do I not start him? Do I start him? Not start him? And then waste a starting spot for him when on average, he's not going to give you the production that he wants. And I think he still has the name value, and I think that he still has the hope associated with him because it's not like there's 2 weeks left in the NFL season. There's still, 6-7 weeks left. And so people are still kind of like, okay, things can turn around. And like you said, there's a narrative that you can tell yourself that Todd Gurley is going to get back on track. And I think you can sell someone in your league on that and hopefully get, the player won't be as good or won't have as high, but you could get a consistent guy. Like DJ Moore, I would trade Todd Gurley for DJ Moore in a heartbeat. No questions asked.
Yeah, and I'm really glad we started with these two to begin this conversation with Alshon Jeffrey and with Todd Gurley. There are probably a few other names out there, but you're basically thinking like, you know what? I have to put them in my lineup. Like they're Alshon Jeffrey and Todd Gurley. Like these are players who like you start to think who wouldn't put them in their lineup, or like everybody would say that you need to put them in your lineup somewhere. But that's basically playing not to lose rather than playing to win at this point.
Right. Who's another guy that you think it's safe to cut ties with?
So if you're, and this hurts my feelings a little bit, if you're waiting for the Marquez Valdes-Scantling breakout to occur, it's just not going to happen this season. He was a pretty popular breakout candidate, largely because it felt like he just solidified himself as the number 2 wide receivers with Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. And he had a pretty decent rookie season that nobody really expected. But he's just been slow to make a true difference in the passing game. He didn't grab the reins when Devontae Adams went down. Instead, it just felt like the Packers considered their 2 running backs to be the better pass catchers, which definitely boosted their value. So he's basically only been valuable when he's able to just catch one of those giant bombs. He scored 18 and 20 points in 2 different games this season, but they basically all came on one Hail Mary catch, and 2 games out of 9, 10 now. That's not something that you can bank on. It's going to get colder in Green Bay. Yesterday, if you watched the Packers and Carolina Panthers game, it was flurrying a little bit, which makes things a little bit difficult.
Snow football is back.
And I just think, with him, failing to capitalize, and the emergence of Alan Lazard. You can see his breakout over the last 5 games. His targets were 4, 5, 5, 4, and 6 targets compared to MVS, who had 2, 3, 2, 2, 1.
Yeah.
So if you're still waiting, if he's on your bench like he was on mine before this week, just you're okay with cutting ties. I don't think you're going to get much for him in a trade.
Yeah. No, he's in one of my leagues, and I've been basically every time he's had a good game, he's been on my bench, and every other time he's been starting for me. And so, yeah, I am 100%. I agree with you. I am going to drop him. In fact, I just dropped him while you were talking because you convinced me so much. And
breaking news.
Breaking news. Marquez Valdes-Scantling no longer on my fantasy team. And yeah, it's one of those players where you keep hoping that something will come. And it's because he's such like an enticing player, because anytime he does anything, the commentators, they're always like, oh, Valdes-Scantling, he's 6'3" and runs a 4.3. And you're like, oh God, yes. Like with Aaron Rodgers, that's exactly what I want. Like, this guy's going to eat. And it just hasn't come to fruition. And so it's time to just give up and not expect it to ever truly solidify into the fantasy star that we thought he could be.
Yeah, he's probably been, if you're like me, a disappointment in that you thought that he could be just a guy that could slot in when you need a bye week replacement for a receiver, somebody who could just come in and, put up 10 points, but he's barely been able to do that on most weeks. It's hard to tell when he will.
Yeah, not good there. Another wide receiver who's been on my bench for a long time. Actually, he was in my IR slot and now has been activated to my bench. And I think that he is also probably going to get cut. More breaking news during this podcast. I don't think AJ Green is going to give you anything this year. I really was holding on to him, hoping beyond hope that he could get healthy a little bit earlier than currently now. But that he could get healthy, that he could remind us all that AJ Green is a top 5 wide receiver, or at least he used to be when he was healthy, and that with Andy Dalton and that connection is still very viable. But now the Bengals have completely turned on the tank, and it is now Ryan Finley throwing the football, who was against the Ravens, and AJ Green got another setback on his ankle. And so I don't think that he's really going to be healthy at all this season. And if I were him, I would just sit out this year. I wouldn't play. Like, why would you risk your health and earning potential on a season that's entirely lost for Cincinnati and for the Bengals? And for your fantasy team, if he's still on there, it's time to just drop him and just move on and accept the fact that you were smart in the higher level of thinking that, yes, man, I'm just going to keep him on my roster. I can save a roster spot because if he comes back, I suddenly get myself a wide receiver 1 during the fantasy playoffs. But that has not come true, and it's time to just accept and move on.
Yeah, it's really kind of disappointing. You hope that AJ Green, just by taking the year off and reducing his the amount of hits that he's taken, that he'll just be able to still come back and produce for a couple more years, because I love AJ Green.
I
always
love
thought
him
he was
so much.
One of the better players in the league that just, because he was in Cincinnati, just never really got his due.
And he'll forever be like the Calvin Johnson, where it's like, didn't say anything, like let his play do the talking. Julio Jones is also like this, but like Calvin Johnson was like, will permanently be associated with just bad teams. And you're like, man, just imagine what this player could have been if they were on like a team that was an offense that was potent and powerful and good and the whole 9 yards. Him especially. Calvin Johnson had Matt Stafford towards the end of things to at least, boost his stats and show us like exactly how dominant he could be. But AJ Green, a career of Andy Dalton is tough.
Yeah, if he had been healthy this season, just based on his history and just kind of the player he is, I would thought 100% he would have been in the right and would not have faulted him for forcing his way out of Cincinnati if he felt that was the right move. I can't think of anybody who would be like, Cincinnati just treated you well, or you got something going in
Right.
Cincinnati. You should
Right.
stay.
Even
Like,
Bengals fans would be like, no, man, we understand. We respect it. Go on.
they'd be like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. You should leave.
Who's the final guy for you who you think is safe to cut?
Final guy. This one is another wide receiver in the boomer bust category in the vein of Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and who was earlier in the season kind of a hot waiver wire ad. Like people probably blew a lot of fab money picking this guy up. I'm sorry, but he is not worth the fab amount anymore. It was a good rental. Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. I know it feels like with Patrick Mahomes and that offense, and you feel like any one of them is a viable option. But I still think that when Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, when they're all on the field, that's where they want to go. It's not like a free for all, everybody eats type of situation. They're still very much in the vein of like, yeah, we just got to get the ball in our best playmakers' hands. Granted, somebody could get hurt, somebody could get injured again, but I think you're holding on for hope that somebody gets injured, which isn't a very good look, first of all, and second of all, that there's a small chance that that happens anyway.
And even when they were dealing with all of those injuries, it wasn't like he was the clear cut number one guy. Like Sammy Watkins was still leading the team in targets, and then you still have Travis Kelsey to deal with, and they do like to include their running backs in the passing game. And so, yeah, he had like two really big games, and this is why I was like hesitant to go crazy for him because of the fact that this Chiefs offense has been so much outside of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey. It's kind of like you throw to the open person, which is great, really hard to stop in an actual football game. But only once in this season has he received over 6 targets, and he's only seen 6 targets twice, and then everything else has been under that. So it's like during all of these stretches where the Chiefs had banged up wide receivers, he was like seeing regularly double digit or even like 8 targets a game. It's always been like 3 to 5 targets, and that's not something that's reliable when you're the 4th string wide receiver and you're hoping that maybe Tyreek Hill gets banged up again or Travis Kelsey goes, whatever. You're hoping for injury.
Yeah, if you're looking like at Demarcus Robinson's average PPR points per game, you see it's at 6.9. You're like, nice. Maybe he will exceed that total in this game. Maybe he'll raise that floor and exceed it. But really, over the past 8 games, that fantasy points per game is 3.1 because he just had a monstrous, I believe, like week 2 or week 3 when he got like 32 points.
Yeah, week 2
So
against
that's
Oakland.
you cannot extrapolate that over the course of the season to determine his actual value here. So, yeah, not worth the roster spot anymore, fellas. I'm sorry.
Yep. I completely agree. And another wide receiver, we'll wrap it up with another wide receiver, one who is on 47% of Yahoo leagues. And I think it is just time to, if you have him on your team, it's time to just move on. And that's Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard, I know, has shown us in last year and in years past and a little bit this year that he is still a very viable wide receiver for the Giants, but the guy just can't stay healthy. And at a certain point, he's reaching that like Brandon Cooks level of concussion worry where he gets one more, like he's got to seriously consider not playing anymore. He's been out for, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And they got a week 11 bye. I don't know. I think 47% is a high percentage for someone who hasn't played since week like 5 and is not even really a lock to play again this season.
Yeah, that sort of thing is just kind of hard to determine. You see players with like a sprained ankle or they have a hamstring strain, and you can kind of estimate like, oh, I can still hold on to them. They'll come back for me. But like with concussion stuff and things of that nature, it's hard to really truly determine. Like we might have another Percy Harvin situation on our hands, and it kind of sort of looks like Golden Tate might be the guy.
And Darius Slayton,
for Daniel
baby.
Jones.
Not to spoil some waiver wire ads, but
Darius Slayton, I would like to pat myself on the back for
yes,
saying to keep an eye on him a couple weeks ago. But yeah, it just, I don't know. Sterling Shepard is a tough play at this point because you never know if he's actually going to
Right.
see the field.
He's already had 2 concussions this year, and I have a feeling that a third is not far down the line if he plays, and would then put him out for the rest of the year. And so it's a situation where there are wide receivers out there on the waiver wire who you can probably still get, who are A, playing, and B, have given continuous production up until this point. And I just don't know if Sterling Shepard is worth holding on to at this point in time when you're trying to make a fantasy playoff push.
Agreed.
But now that we've told you to cut all of these people or to get them off your roster, who could you possibly replace them with? Jordan, what is some top names on the waiver wire for you this week?
I think we might have talked about this guy before. So sorry if we're repeating ourselves, but
that just means you got to go get them. If they show up multiple times on the pod, you got to get them.
Exactly. It's just confirmation bias at this point. Start taking a look at Cole Beasley for somebody who right now is kind of producing with a consistently decent floor. Over the past month, he's had games in between 11.6 is the high for his half point PPR total, and 8.3 is the low. He's got a game against Miami next week. He's got a game against Denver, who hasn't looked that great. New England is a tough one in week 16, but you know what? If you need somebody over like week 11 and 12 when he plays Miami and Denver, while people are still going out and buy, you might want to look at him for a flex spot.
Yeah, and plus, even against the Patriots, he had a good game when they played back in week 3 or 4, I think. He's a slot guy, and the Patriots aren't like that. Is if you're looking for a weakness in the secondary, that is one that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, so he has 3 touchdowns in the past month. So that's kind of ballooning his scores a little bit, but he is kind of like the red zone guy. Like when Frank Gore can't fall across the goal line, it's going towards Cole Beasley, who's been the red zone guy for him.
Yeah. We already talked about Darius Slayton, but I got to make sure that we talk more about Darius Slayton because it's time to take him seriously and it's time to get him on your roster. He's gone over 19 PPR points and has caught 2 touchdowns in 2 of his last 3 games. Obviously, that's probably not going to be consistent, but he is still going to be a boom or bust guy, but has a chance to be a lot of booming in the coming weeks. They play the Eagles twice, the Dolphins and Washington. And so those are all secondaries that teams can take full advantage of. And Daniel Jones can sling it when he wants to, and he's looking Darius Slayton's way when he does.
Yeah, in week 5, I believe it was against Minnesota when he caught that touchdown like in the back of the end zone. Was it one of the first weeks that Danny Jones started? I can't remember, but it was like a really good catch. And when I watched that highlight, I was like, who is that guy? And I realized it was a rookie. And I was like, you know what? This guy probably got a lot of good reps with Daniel Jones over the summer months. So, yeah, that rapport could start to build.
Yeah, and Daniel Jones came in week 3 against Tampa Bay, and that's exactly when Darius Slayton started doing things. So it's clearly that he and Jones have a connection.
Miami and Washington in weeks 15 and 16.
Oh, it's Philly week 14, Miami week 15, Washington week 16, Philly week 17. That is a pretty nice stretch of games to close your fantasy playoffs on.
Very juicy just for the Giants overall in terms of fantasy value. Saquon, Golden Tate, Danny Dimes.
Lots of juice there. You could make lots of freshly squeezed orange juice from that.
The juice is loose again.
Oh, God. Anyone else that you should be targeting off waivers?
I don't know. You might want to, hit that flag button to add Randall Cobb to the watch list. He's kind of always consistently been one of those guys who you should just cut bait with, but he does have 6 catches over the past 2 games. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye on.
Nice. I also have been talking myself into James Washington of the Steelers as basically being the now number 1 guy in Pittsburgh, which sounds ridiculous with Juju there. But the fact that he and Mason Rudolph both went to Oklahoma State together, you saw that on full display where Washington saw 7 targets and caught 6 of them for 90 yards and a touchdown. It's now the second game that Washington has gone over 10 PPR points. I just think that moving forward, that he and Rudolph, just in the way that we talked about Slayton and Daniel Jones, that is a real thing, having a wide receiver quarterback connection and having trust with that. And it seems like something that, Rudolph is still developing with Juju, and Juju is still learning how to be that number one receiver and seeing all number one targets or number one corners and defenses paying attention to you. I like James Washington having quietly a pretty productive rest of the season going forward.
Yeah, I want to do a quick addendum. I misspoke, I believe, before. I meant to say Randall Cobb has 6 catches in both of the past 2 games, so 12 overall. But I do like the James Washington pick. I was very disappointed in his rookie season and everything that he's done basically up until this point. But Pittsburgh, if they continue to keep it rolling, it feels like that defense might be sparking a little bit of something, and they might be
pretty damn good.
Yeah, they might be poised to go on a run because they have some vulnerable teams coming up. Cleveland twice, Cincinnati, and then the hardest one on their schedule looks like Buffalo in week 15. They have Baltimore, but that's in week 17. So yeah, they could be looking to make a little bit of a wild card run, which definitely increases James Washington's value.
Yeah. Also, go get Darius Geis because he's healthy and he's going to be playing.
Geis, baby.
The goose is loose. There it is. Nailed it. Awesome. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, the whole 9 yards. Follow us on Twitter at RB1 Podcast. Follow myself at Pete M. Rogers and follow Jordan at Jordan_Smith27. We will be back at you Thursday, hopefully with the whole cast of characters to give you week 11 starts and sits. But until then, peace.